Hi everybody, my name is Walter Scott. I'm a senior developer at Sharper. You can reach me on Twitter at WalterCodes and various other ways if you're creative. My title for my talk today initially was PWA Everyday Progressive Web Apps versus Native Apps. But as I started to research, I learned that that's actually the wrong question to ask. Instead, I'm just going to be talking about progressive web apps because everybody should be learning about progressive web apps and implementing them in their applications for a few reasons. First, I'll cover why, and then I'll cover some how. First of all, at least some of your users will insist on accessing your website using their phone. One example that is near and dear to my heart is my wife. So that was in a hidden note, and I mirrored. Anyway, so I'm winging that one. She is a very tech-savvy individual. She knows how to find the right tool for the job. She can always figure out how to do anything she wants to do. When she's at work, she uses all of the tools available to her, figures out all the best things. She's an elementary school teacher. When she's at home, she will not touch a laptop. She uses her iPhone for everything. So if your website does not work on her iPhone, she's not going to use your product. She's actually really insistent about that. So she's kind of living on the edge, pushing developments in technology. So some of the attributes of a progressive web app: it's responsive, which many websites are now. You can use it on any screen size. It doesn't look awful on any of them. It's capable of handling poor or no connectivity. So in order to do that, we use service workers and a lot of caching and things like that. It feels like an app. So you have a clean UI. Maybe you get rid of the browser. The URL bar has cohesive interaction, all those things. You can keep it up to date with Serviceworker updates. It's safe because you send all your traffic over TLS. You can't do a service worker without using TLS. It's with WC3 manifests, which are still pretty experimental. You can be discoverable by search engines, and it also enables a lot more app behavior. It's also capable of initiating interactions through push notifications and other traditionally app-like features. You can install it to the home screen in certain cases through browser-provided prompts. That's going to get more and more common over time. So users get to install the app without using app stores, and adding it to their home screen gives you some knobs to turn, gives them some better features. Everything within a PWA is linkable, so you can jump to certain points within it without, so you still have the magic of the web. And I stole all of this mercilessly from Alex Russell. And also, I should mention, the term progressive web app was coined by Francis Bergman, along with Alex Russell. Now, my how is going to be a screencast I made so I can keep the pacing consistent. If this looks awful, then we're going to have to go off script and do something else. Let's try this. So the application I used, instead of making my own because I'm not very creative, I used to do MVC. It's an MVC framework demo thing that lets you see the same application implemented across a bunch of different frameworks. So that's the purpose for it. But I used it to try to make that app a little bit more progressive. So you can you can grab the Git repo here, and that includes all the example apps. So all the AngularJS, React, Angular, all of them. Sorry. And so you just clone that, and then you have all that source that you can use. I'm ahead of myself with my screencast. And because I'm tethering, I can't see what I'm doing. So anyway, yeah. You'll notice that as we pull up the app in a minute, okay, back to here. I used HTTP server to serve the static content because it doesn't actually have any backend code, and you can't see the bottom part of that. That's cool. Anyway, this sets us up. HTTP server with the default attributes just sets us up with port 8080 on the loop back so that we can talk locally on the host. Now, since TLS is one of the requirements, I'm actually going to use a thing called ngrok because that gives me TLS without doing anything to the app to make it support it. Ngrok's also great for a lot of other things. A little bit ahead of myself, so I'm just going to chill for a second. Yeah, so ngrok is pretty simple. You can install it from the website. The website explains all the great things you can do with it. It's a tool that lets you tunnel remote traffic to your local host. So you can use it to share demos with people, to get a website working on a phone that couldn't work otherwise, all sorts of things that can take a lot of work otherwise. I just did ngrok HTTP to port 8080, and that gives me a tunnel that I can then access within my simulator and also within the main browser. Just seeing that everything works here. So that takes care of the TLS part for us. The next thing we're going to do is implement manifests. And I'm skipping to another branch because I am not a good live coder. In fact, I'm awful. So you guys would hate to suffer through that. So anyway, we're switching to the new branch. And I'm just going to pull up and show how we source the manifest.json. We add a style sheet, a style link basically, that says this is where you find the manifest.json. And then you do simple things like name, short URL. You can set the display mode, which I did standalone, which gets rid of the URL bar, and probably other things I don't know about. There's a description, and then the icon that gets used when you save it to the home screen. Browser support, like I said, is limited. Right now it works on Chrome for Android, Safari, not Safari, definitely not Safari. Opera Mobile. We're actually going to pull that up in just a second. Let me jump to that. Works on Opera Mobile. And Firefox has it's marked down as not having basic support. It's got a question mark. I don't know how to read these tables, but it does support some of the features. Oh, did that disappear? Sorry. Now, to check out where we are on these things, I'm using a tool called Lighthouse. It's put out by Google. It lets you basically verify where you are on the PWA checklist, which, again, was put out by Google. But most people largely agree on what makes a PWA. It's a set of features or things it supports or best practices, those sorts of things that improve the user experience, make it faster, make it load on more devices, those sorts of things. There's an NPM package and also a browser extension. I installed the browser extension. And it takes a while to run, but it runs you through a bunch of different tests and lets you know where you are on the score. I thought I cut more of that out. Here we go. So it tells you which audits you failed, which you succeeded. We don't have a service worker yet. There are some things we're not going to implement yet because I ran out of time. So we won't get to installing the being prompted, but we will add to home screen. Basically, the one we did add is the HTTPS. So you wouldn't get that out of the box. Moving on, we're now going to implement a service worker, which is there's a lot of focus in the PWA world on service workers, and that's because that's what facilitates this operation like an app. And it lets you do the seamless caching, lets you run offline well, those sorts of things. It really is pretty magical from what I've seen so far. And they're fairly simple to implement. You basically just add, we're registering our service worker by adding an event we listen for the load event on the page. Tripping over my tongue here. And that calls this /serviceworker.js. And then when the service worker is installed, it triggers an install event. And this is only run once per service worker unless you have an upgrade or something like that. Actually, no, I'm tripping. There might actually be an upgrade event. It only runs once per service worker. Here I'm setting a cache version because if you have different versions of your service worker, and they all run at the same time and they expect different cache things, that will lead to bad results as you might expect. And so basically when I install the PWA, when I install the service worker, I request these resources and cache them locally so that when I try to request them offline, I can. And this is just a simple fallback offline.html and this offline.js that lets me switch back and forth between the offline and online mode. Then this is where I added it to the index.html to get those firing. Offline.html also calls the offline.js. At first I didn't add that, which was awesome. I just sat there waiting for it to switch and it didn't. But anyway, yeah. This basically, when I go online, I redirect to the index. When I go offline, I redirect to offline.html. And I'm just using the offline and online events for those, which some of you might have seen already. Now, here I was kind of struggling with like cached stuff because I had one version before, and so it looks kind of funny. Basically, I disabled cache, re-enabled cache. I realized after the fact that with ngrok, all you have to do is kill the ngrok endpoint, restart it, and that's automatic cache busting because it's now a new URL. So if you're doing this yourself and you're using ngrok for whatever reason, that's a good way to cache bust. Or you can just click like a maniac like I did. So now I'm about convinced that the service worker is installed and running. So now we go offline, and it just says, it's really simple. If you're offline, you'll be returned when your connection's restored. Go back online, go back to the index. Awesome UX, I know. It's not super responsive. I didn't set a viewport. That's probably the main thing. They do actually have media queries in there, and they respond to the screen size, but they don't make it big on the mobile. That was another thing I was going to get to and didn't. And now I'm wondering what past Walter was doing with this. I think I recopied the clip, I think. So let me jump forward in my screencast. I am a really good video editor. Rerunning. So now we are running a service worker. So we passed off one more audit. Big progress. This lets me do the offline thing. So the next thing that I was going to demo real quick, because disappointingly, I cannot figure out how to trigger the add to home screen, even with a really well-established PWA like mobile Twitter mobile, I mean. I've added it to my home screen because it's prompted me to, but if I try to get it to do it anywhere, in simulator, on my phone, whatever, it just doesn't do it. So it only does it when you're not trying to make it do it. Anyway, so you can just do the add to home screen. It uses the icon, which creatively was just a screenshot of the app itself because I like to reach out to creative places. You can set a title for the link. You can either drag it and drop it, or you can just add automatically. So when you drop out, you now have a home screen icon, or a bunch if you've done this a few times. When you launch, you got that splash screen real quick. I don't know if you saw that. This is something that the manifest gives you. You can set a background, you can set the icon, you can set what words it puts on that splash screen. So now we're running the app under the service worker thing. We don't have a URL bar anymore, although it's a little less obvious with the screen cut off. Excuse me. And everything still works. That brings us to the end of the useful parts of my screencast. And basically, cut the end of the material. But basically, I just want to make one last pitch for PWAs. You might end up making a native app, but make that decision separate from whether you're going to make your app add more progressive enhancement to your web app. Because there are going to be lots of people who will not install an app. Or they will if they really care about the service they're using, but otherwise they just don't touch it. And then there's going to be more and more people like my wife who just don't want to go through the hassle. You know, they know what works for them, and they go with that. Does anybody have any questions? Matt.
What you monkeyed around with Cordova to get some of the service worker features on iOS?
I have not messed with Cordova on iOS. Oh, and thank you for reminding me. That's something I completely forgot to put in the materials. So the service worker browser support is also limited. Let me Google that. I have not messed with Cordova, though. Have you messed with that?
No,
I mean, we use PhoneGap for our main app, just running an Angular thing, but I sort of see this as an alternative to that, where maybe the browser support's not quite there, but the Safari team has announced that they're working on service workers, and that PWAs are now going to be a priority going forward. And for Google, it's been a priority for a long time. Firefox is working on it. I actually don't know much of the specifics on what Firefox is doing, but they love the web, so they got to love PWAs, right? Microsoft is doing a huge push. And I'm not super familiar with the Microsoft ecosphere, but I know that I see stuff all the time. They're like, I think they're going to do service worker support in Edge on the next release or something like that. So it's coming. It's going to be there real soon. So yeah, for the service workers, you have Chrome for Android, Firefox Mobile, Firefox OS, I guess, and Opera Mobile. Other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
How do you cache stuff that you would normally pull down from the server? That you want to be available, things that might change that you want to be available on your initial or your app, like maybe your data.
No, this isn't the resource. I pretty much, if you go to the progressive web app section on Google, they'll give you a good checklist. They also have great resources on the service workers, but covering a little bit of the code that on my really simple, stupid app. I did this all outside of AngularJS, just so everybody knows. Yeah. How's that? Cool. So basically, you'll do an initial cache for anything that has to be there for the app to load initially on your install event. And then I didn't do the other part myself, so I can't show you. But basically, you will also have, you can implement background sync either on like a page load or coming back online or something like that. And that's where you'll typically have, you'll try to pull it from cache if it exists, or you'll load it from the network if it doesn't, or vice versa. You can have network first, cache first, and then then it just gets into all the complexities of implementing caching, From what people say, the caching built into service workers is a lot easier to use than the old app cache library. I call it old. I don't know how old it is, but everybody says, don't use app cache, use this instead, or this is much better, basically. Yeah, I think you respond to some kind of event, either a load or something like that. I will find that, though, and post it on the UtahJS Slack. I can't find that page off the top of my head right now, though. That's what I use to implement the other stuff, so it's there. I just got to find it.
Are there any restrictions to the types of stuff you can add to that cache, like file types? Or?
I don't know that. I know you can do images for sure and HTML for sure. And like, I'm pretty sure there's not a limit. I think you can cache like API endpoints and whatever. It's just any HTTP request, you can cache the result of it. But I could be wrong. I didn't try. That's the right answer, right? Any other questions? Well, looks like I came in way under time, so letting you guys out early, I guess.